On December 19, 2005, everything changed. Up until that day, my life had been simple, in a quiet house near the edge of some thick woods. The house was old, with creaky wooden floors and an attic that no one ever used. There wasn't much to do around our place, but I didn't mind. Most of the time, Maggie and I would explore the woods behind our house or spend hours playing hide and seek. Life was slow and peaceful, the kind of life you'd think would last forever until it didn't. It started with my dad getting sick. One cold winter evening, he came home from work, and I could tell right away that something wasn't right. He was pale, almost grey, and his eyes looked sunken. He coughed a horrible, wet cough that rattled through his chest and collapsed onto the couch as soon as he walked through the door. My mom rushed over, but she didn't seem too worried at first. She just thought it was the flu, or maybe a bad cold. But that night, Dad's condition got worse. His coughing wouldn't stop, and he could barely catch his breath. By morning, he was so weak he couldn't even stand. I remember sitting on the couch, watching as my mom frantically called for an ambulance. Her voice was shaky, filled with panic. I tried to keep Maggie calm, but I was scared too. I had never seen my dad so helpless. When the ambulance came, they rushed him away to the hospital. My mom left with them, telling me to take care of Maggie until she got back. I was only 12, but I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. That night, alone in the house, something strange happened. It was quiet, too quiet. Maggie was asleep in her room, but I couldn't get any rest. I kept hearing noises, soft whispers, like someone was talking just outside my door. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just the wind, or maybe the house settling. But the whispers got louder. I lay in bed, my heart pounding in my chest, when I saw the shadow in the corner of my room. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The figure was tall and thin, barely more than a dark outline against the wall. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see it more clearly. The figure had long, pale arms, and its skin looked stretched, too tight over its bones. Its eyes glowed faintly red in the dark, and its mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural grin. "I'm your new dad now," the figure said, its voice soft but cold. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt like it was locked shut. The figure took a step toward me, its movement slow and unnaturally smooth, like it was gliding across the floor. "Don't be scared," it whispered. "I'm here to take care of you." I shut my eyes, praying it would go away. And when I opened them again, the figure was gone. I lay there for what felt like hours, too terrified to move, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep, but the image of that figure, the pale skin, the glowing red eyes, the grin stayed burned into my mind. The next morning, I was woken by the sound of my mom's voice. She was home, and she looked exhausted. Her eyes were red from crying, and she sat me down at the kitchen table. That's when she told me the news: my dad had died during the night. I was numb. I didn't know what to say, didn't know what to feel. Maggie was too young to understand, but I knew this would change everything. And it did. The days that followed were a blur of sadness and confusion. My mom was distant, lost in her grief, and I didn't know how to help her. But the figure from that night, it didn't go away. Every night, as soon as I was alone in my room, I would see it again. Standing in the corner, watching me. And every night, it said the same thing: "I'm your new dad now." I tried telling myself it wasn't real, that it was just my mind playing tricks on me because of everything that had happened. But it felt too real. The way it moved, the way it spoke, it was like it knew me, like it was waiting for something. Then, one night, Maggie disappeared. It was a cold night, just like the one when my dad died. I had tucked Maggie into bed and went to check on her an hour later, but she was gone. Her window was open, the curtains blowing in the wind, and there were no signs of her anywhere in the house. My mom was hysterical. We called the police, but no one could find her. It was like she had vanished into thin air. That night, Skin Daddy appeared again. But But this time, he wasn't alone. I could hear Maggie's voice, faint and distant, like she was calling out to me. "She's with me now," Skin Daddy said, his voice calm and cold as ever. "We're all together, and soon, you'll join us." I didn't know what to do. My mom was a wreck, barely able to function, and now Maggie was gone too. The house felt emptier, darker. Skin Daddy started appearing during the day as well. He'd sit in the corner of the room, watching me, his red eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. He didn't say much, but his presence was suffocating. I could feel him watching me, always watching. A week after Maggie disappeared, my mom started acting strange. She would sit at the kitchen table for hours, staring off into space, not speaking, not moving. It was like she wasn't even there anymore. One morning, I tried to talk to her, but when I looked into her eyes, I realized something was wrong. They were empty, hollow, like all the life had been drained from her. "She's leaving too," Skin Daddy whispered that night. "But don't worry, I'm still here. I'll always be here." I couldn't take it anymore. The house felt like a prison, and I was trapped inside with something that wasn't human. I tried to tell my mom, but she wouldn't listen. She was too far gone. I was all alone, and Skin Daddy was the only thing left. The nights grew longer, colder. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel Skin Daddy's presence. I started hearing his voice more and more, telling me about the happy place. He said that's where my dad and Maggie were now, and soon, I'd join them too. I didn't want to believe him, but the longer I listened, the more I started to give in. His voice was hypnotic, pulling me deeper into a darkness I couldn't escape. He promised that everything would be better if I just listened to him, if I just gave in. One night, Skin Daddy came closer than ever before. I was lying in bed when I felt something cold brush against my arm. I opened my eyes, and there he was, leaning over me, his pale face inches from mine. His grin was wider than ever, his teeth sharp and gleaming in the dim light. "It's time to go," he whispered, his cold fingers wrapping around my wrist. "Time to come to the happy place with us." I tried to pull away, but my body wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, frozen in fear, as his grip tightened. The room around me seemed to fade, the walls closing in as the shadows deepened. I could hear Maggie's voice again, calling to me from somewhere far away. And then, everything went black.